Fade these loops.
Hello, welcome to another FMOD deep dive. Today we're talking about the game Lunar Abyss. The sound designers behind this, Ali Tocher and Sergio, created some really cool systems and sounds in place for the various elements of this bullet hell narrative-driven combat game. Today we'll be talking to Ali about numerous things, including accessibility through sound, how they created the environmental hazards, and things like organizing reverb systems for a large-scale game such as this one. As always, if you are currently learning about FMOD or game audio implementation, then I have a gift for you. All you have to do is direct message me using the links below, either via my email or Airwiggles, and I will send you a free lesson and even give you feedback on it. All you have to do is direct message me. Having said all that, let's dive straight into the interview with Ali, and we're going to start by talking about probably the most important part of a bullet hell, which is how to design the sounds for the projectiles. Hi, Ali. How's it going?
Hey, Sergio. Thanks for letting me join you at this. Very exciting to be asked.
Of course, it's always a pleasure to chat. And now I love the fact that we can talk about this and talk about your work out in the public.
Win-win.
There's so much to dive into. The biggest thing is, of course, this is a bullet hell game, Lunar Abyss. So I'm really interested to hear, first of all, about the bullets, about the projectiles, and how you handle that, basically.
Yeah, thanks. So, as you say, the key to the gameplay experience, especially in combat, well, particularly in combat, is that you're going to have a lot of bullets coming at you. And the thing that we were doing outside of the box in this game is a bullet hell shooter in first person. So the thing that you have in third person or isometric is that you can see bullets that are behind you or not directly in front of you. Whereas in first person, that goes out the window. So I was kind of aware that I would want to make the sound for the bullets really explicit so that you're not backing into them and so that you're not being taken unawares, but also to really amplify that feeling of a near miss. I think that was kind of one of the main things that I really wanted to hit on, was that feeling of, because you're sized up in the bullets coming towards you and it just sort of pivots out of your view and you're like, whoo! But I wanted that to really hammer that home with audio. So this is going to be a slightly hard thing to show in FMOD without an actual bullet to fly around. But one of the tools that we do have, and I would make clear, so this is the sandbox window. This I find useful to kind of get a vague idea of what something might feel like, but it's never more than that. Like, you cannot take this as gospel. You need to implement these sounds and see what breaks. But if I use the sandbox as an example, so this is about, I think these are game units and we had them as meters. So if we initiate a bullet out in the distance and send it towards the player, we have a bunch of parameters that are going on. Now I'll jump back to the event really quick, but just, you can hear this basic idea is that, now one of the things you heard there is actually orientation is the big deal too. So if we keep the back of the bullet to the player, the direction away from its travel, you're not so interested in that because that bullet's not coming back to hit you. So actually orientation is a big factor. And these bullets are going pretty quick, so it's probably more accurate to make them sound more like, well, that's probably too quick. And whether it's to your right or to your left is heavily reinforced. And then I also, let's call it laziness, put all the different bullet types in this one event. So we have this parameter bullet size, and so say you're fighting a boss who does a more impressive bullet attack. Oh yeah, these are way more, so you can hear them from way further. And they used to go faster. I can't remember how many we had, several. I'm really trying to emphasize that like phase with the past year. You can hear some of the edges of how the those are the small ones, that's right. So that's kind of an idea of what we're going for in the sandbox. But if I take you back to the event, so you can see we have a bunch of different parameters up here in the timeline window. So we have distance. This is really the very basic thing. But rather than using standard spatialization, just a normal curve to give that feeling of the bullets passing you, we ended up with a lot of both custom volume automation, but also very much EQ sweeps. So that feeling of it being like whoop and like whipping past you, that was all done pretty intentionally with very strong EQs that are sticking out. So, oh, why have I lost that? If you see the EQ down here in the bottom window, oh, it doesn't dynamically, but as you can see from the parameter windows, we're both doing pitch, but also, yeah, these frequency sweeps. So if I play it now, we'll keep it at, yeah, cool. So I'm gonna need to see, this is what I'm talking about the FMOD being hard to show this stuff off.
Yeah, it's hard to do this without the sandbox, right? For sure.
Exactly. So maybe I just show you some of the layers that are in here if you're interested.
I mean, yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be fantastic. It's so cool to see that you're using the so many built-in parameters as well, like distance and event orientation. Like that's really cool.
We also, there's like a difficulty that curve that we added into the game, and that would increase the bullet speed. But what I found is that I designed it in this kind of known range of speed values, and then the designers went, because our tech team made an incredibly versatile system that would just numbers, and suddenly, hey, let's make the bullets go way faster. And suddenly my audio broke. So I added this modifier to all of those kind of pitch and stuff events that would change it. So we have size, distance, but then this orientation thing was the real key, because you want the bullets that are in front of you or right here to have a lot more presence than the ones that are back here.
Okay, let me just break this down real quick for anybody who's trying to follow along. So obviously a bullet and a shot, a gunshot in a game usually is one sound, just the actual shot. But because these are projectiles that are flying, they need to be looped, right? So there's a sound attached to each bullet, which then passes the player's the listener, and then now we get all these parameters in effect. And the distance is just being more specific with the automation curve, which is why you can add it to like EQs and stuff like that, and really change the filtering depending on distance. And then event orientation, of course, is what is taking into account the direction that the listener is facing, the player, and also the emitter, which in this case is the projectile. Right, which is interesting, because then, like you said, you can manipulate how important a sound is by hearing it in a different direction, whether it's flying away from you or towards you, and present more tension and threat to the player.
I think it really also emphasizes the strength of the first person experience, which is that you can quickly turn the camera, that orientation will change, and the soundscape will change, because you really are sometimes in a sea of these bullets. Like, you think of a traditional bullet hell game, we have these kind of grids. Well, they're not grids, they're often using circles, but they'll fire out, and there's sort of bullets all around you. You're trying to find the gap. And then as you slide through and turn, all those bullets adapt. And I think that's one of the things that made it work. And actually, you bring up a really interesting point with the looping, because I didn't start with the looping sound. I actually had a short sound that sounded kind of like this. Except it just was a one shot. It went whoop, 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 whoop. Done. And I used pitch, and I got some really good effects in our initial combat sandbox, where the enemies were at a pretty fixed distance, and they'd fire the bullet at you, and it would go whoop, 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 whoop. And I was like, oh, that's great. Okay, we're done. Well, not we're done. I knew we weren't there yet. Then we go out into the game, and some of the arenas are huge, and the enemies are firing you from ages away. So they shoot their shot. It goes one, 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 one in silence, because it hasn't even reached the attenuation radius yet. Then the bullet arrives to you and is completely silent. You know, I wasn't fortune telling on this. I did that first, and then I had to solve the problem, which is that, oh, this may need to play indefinitely. And so that's when we got to this idea of breaking those stems into loops.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Makes total sense. And it also shows how you're you need the gameplay, you need the context, and you also need to be scalable, right? Like you said, like if the designers decide to add a whole new level, which is again twice the size, you don't have to go back into the project and fix something you previously did if you've made it scalable. And by using this parameter, it could be any size at this point, right?
And even parameters such as a modifier, like you can just add that, and that's the beauty of middleware and staying versatile, is that then, 90% through the project, they change something major and you adapt to it.
So tell me about this the difficulty projectile
I mean,
modifier.
I will have to remind myself, but essentially, let's find out. So for the difficulty modifier, what was happening? Well, I was misremembering. It wasn't that we sped up the top end of bullets. The sounds actually handled that well. It was on easier modes. So we had a kind of a hard mode, and that the system handled that. But then we made a story mode, which really took a lot of the challenge out of combat and made some of the bullets basically hang in the air. And as you can see with my system, it's not designed to do that. So this is really a low cut. So because they started just getting really muddy because the pitch is low and the frequency sweeps are low. And so I turn the volume down and I cut the bottom out when you get into lower difficulties.
That's so cool. That's so interesting to hear. Again, like something else that maybe we don't anticipate or we don't think about. Like difficulties can change the sound design.
Right.
That's
No,
awesome.
I definitely didn't assume that going in. That's for sure.
No, I wouldn't have thought that either. I don't think that's usually the case.
And I think it was a really interesting challenge to take. So, I mean, I actually think this is a pretty pure representation of what I liked from a sonic perspective is this layer and the ability to pitch it. So it was quite interesting extrapolating that out into a loop from a one shot and then adding in these kind of other layers, which are essentially noise, but that can be colored by the filters. So that's what kind of adds the realism and the size. So you essentially just get different size noises. Oh yeah, this one's worth mentioning. So I think break or at least ignore some rules about peaking and distortion. Because this is not a good sound. I don't think anyone's like loving that sound. However, this sound was created so that in the distance, when the bullet gets really close and the angle is tight, then it really so. And some of that stuff, especially when it's going fast, I can't show you the speed here. That's why you need the sandbox. It was really, really effective. And then you'll hear different noise. Like these are not nice sounds because it's not a nice thing. It's a bullet. So these were the layers, and all centered around that womp womp, but then with different noise-based tails, essentially.
Which makes total sense because you're effectively like creating the passing of air, like a big continuous.
Right.
And wind is very noisy, right? Basically,
Right.
the movement of air. I wonder if we couldn't listen to the close layer in the sandbox if we maybe just soloed it and then.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Great thought. Yeah, the sandbox is powerful. It is powerful. It's janky, and I think it sometimes tells me that I have issues that I don't really have in actuality, but now let me get that to 0, difficulty to 1. It's oh, I think I know why. Let me so then that's our size. And it's really hard to get the speed right because the bullets come pretty quick.
And just to be clear, I mean, I get the effect. That's actually a really cool idea. Just to be clear, you're not peaking this or distorting this inside of FMOD, right? This is the file itself.
Both. Yeah. No, I will absolutely not have an issue with it digitally distorting inside FMOD either. If that's the effect, if that's like called for, if you need more room, like I almost prefer it to compression sometimes, like to be able to have the dynamic range and then exceed it and just have that kind of artificial limiting come in. Works to me. I mean, it's like that air pressure. That is what would happen if a big thing went past your ear would overload and you would just get this like
I love that. I mean, it's like plugins like OTT, right?
right,
The whole
right.
point.
But OTT is a compressor, and I love dynamic range. I don't use very much compression,
Interesting.
and I'm happy with it peaking, which is probably a terrible thing to admit.
Well, I
But
mean,
no one's complained yet.
I assume we haven't gone into the mixer yet, but I assume you've limited it so that it's not going to blow anybody's eardrums, but
Correct.
it's going to give that effect.
Correct.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Again, that's so creative and using middleware to finish your sound design process.
I think that is a very kind word to use the word creative there, but thank you.
No, not at all. In this next section, we'll be talking to Ali about how they created the sound for the environmental hazards, or the lasers in many cases. Again, showing how using parameters to manipulate multiple layers can create a much more immersive and tense scenario for the player. Using things like parameters is something that I teach in my course FMOD Challenges, and if you are currently learning FMOD right now, I will send you a free gift, so a free lesson like I said at the start of this video. All you have to do is message me, so keep it in mind whilst you're watching the rest of this interview. Right, let's go back to Ali. Okay, another thing that really fascinates me, and you've posted about this in social media as well, are the lasers, the hazards, the environmental hazards that you have in the game.
Yes.
I'd love to break down those.
This is going to be a little bit tricky to show in FMOD, but let's give it a whirl. So again, I have a central event, but then other iteration of it. Actually, this time I did break them out into different ones. It's not just a parameter inside the main event. There are actually different points. So basically, a laser in our game. One of the things about this team on Lunar Abyss at Bonsai Collective is that they really, from day one, wanted to keep the systems versatile and adaptable. So these lasers were an object that a designer could place in the level. They would be an emitter, and the laser would go until it hit something. And so again, this could be a tiny corridor, or this could be maybe a mile in game land. And so the issue became, how do you create a sound? Because it's also just a game object is that thing, and that's what I need to put the sound on. So, excuse me, designer, specify whether you'll be placing a 1 meter one or a 100 meter one. Like, that's not my option. I need to make a versatile sound. So, and I've got the exact same parameters. That's weird. I'm in the old event. So, actually, this is not parameter heavy. It's all based on your proximity to the laser. So, but first, there's two things going on. So to deal with that range of space, I use splines. So I use splines a lot in this game. But a spline actually, maybe Sergio will link you to a little dev blog I did about this if you'd like to know more. But a spline is a vector. It's a line between 2 points in the game space. And what you can do is make a small object, game object, have it attach to that line. And if you think about it like a rail with a wheel on it or something, I don't know, that's a terrible analogy, but then you can move, the sound object will move along the spline to the point nearest to the player. So what that means, you can have a small object, but it will always remain in relative position to the player. So as they move up and down the laser, it will sound consistent, even though it's actually a very small sound. Because the other option is you make a sound that has the width to cover the laser, but then we don't deal with width. We have sound in both dimensions. So you would hear it as you approached it from really far away, and that doesn't work. So
right, we're talking about a line, right? Which could be the edge of like an ambience, for instance, that needs to take into consideration the player's approach. Because like you said, being a line, we can't add a circle or a sphere of sound around it because it's not going to be accurate, right? If I'm at one end of the laser, it just doesn't work, if that makes sense. I will definitely link the video and your blog post.
Oh, thanks. So I think one of the like kind of well, one of the places that I became aware of this was doing like shorelines, for example. Very similar example. You've got an area, but you don't want it to bleed left up and in and out. You just want it to bleed left and right. So this event is the one that sits on the spline. I also have another event that spawns at the end of the thing where it hits the wall, because we have the effects of it kind of splashing off the wall. And then yeah, just a couple of other variants. I actually have an ambient which gets placed at every laser, so that in the area around it, the air is kind of crackly, but it's not tied to the location in the same way. So I can show all of these pieces. Final bit of context, similarly to the bullets. So, I mean, you might see it in the gameplay, but the thing about the laser is it's supposed to be a traversal obstacle. So you are supposed to run and slide under it or jump through them. And we designed it so that it's near misses. They're obstacles, it's supposed to be limbo, high jump. It's supposed to give you that feeling. So very similarly to the bullets, it's when you are close to the laser that I really want to hammer you with it. So that the basic thing I had in my head is that someone's swinging a lightsaber at you and you're ducking under the way of it like the Matrix, and it's like I wanted the sound to be like you'd expect from that, like whoa, I shouldn't talk it up too much because this was hard, but so there's a couple of things that I was shown about it. So you'll see here we have just a basic multi-instrument, but this multi-instrument contains a stack of pre-made events, and I will talk about why. And then I've got the close nested event, which I can show too. So the main event contains these, they are actually identical. Well, they're very similar loops. But what I did is I actually did the pitch check, because there are also many times when there is not just one laser, there's 3 in a line or 5 in a line. You've got to jump over them or slide under all of them. And as we know from video games, and you'll see, repeated identical sounds is one of the immersion breaking things that we can do. So you want variety. However, because they are quite tonal and they can be all in a line, random pitch was not an option for me, because you will get discordant stuff. And I wanted harmonious stuff. So I pre-made these loops to have different pitches. With their curate. Same source sound, but different curated sounds. And then, so each one has this close variant in it as well, which is going to give us that whoop as we go past it. So if I just play the event, I'll go into the close one in a second, and we tweak the ambient distance. So you're going to start away from the laser. And then as you approach it, it remains pretty close. Probably going to be around 10. Oh, it's impossible. I wonder if this is actually one for the sandbox again.
Yeah, let's try it.
Because I can.
Amazing. And again, you're clipping the sound, which has this really
I am
effect as well. Like, yeah, I wouldn't want to play Limbo under these.
Well, the idea is you're supposed to be like, whoa, that was close. And I feel like actually that was achieved, and I am proud of the result for that. So here's a laser. And then, but really you're sliding under it, so you're going fast. And then we should get different pitch now. So you can imagine, oh, actually, you don't need to imagine, I could do this. Can I move 3 at once? I've never tried. If I grab them all. No. Oh, control. Oh. Oh, no. There's the power of the sandbox, ladies and gentlemen. All right.
What if you move the listener? What if you added a listener and moved that towards?
Oh, yeah. I've never done that before.
This is actually a good point to explain like how the sandbox works. If you don't right click and add a listener, i.e. a player, the middle of the sandbox is the listener by default, which is why Ali's been like,
Yeah, that's why I actually have never added a listener before. Oh, cool. All right, so let's imagine we're passing by 3 lasers. Yeah, that actually works quite well. But as it's a random container, you're not going to get that same arpeggio. You're going to get different ones. So let me just look at the close.
that sounds so cool, by the way.
Oh, thanks. It was so fun. Like, it was so fun.
And like that.
So this is also distance. So this is us using a scatterer event. And the thing that is being affected on the scatterer is the spawn rate. So we can have a little bit of crackles, but then as you get close, it sounds like the air is having a bad time. Which is cool, because also the thing about these lasers, like bullets, the game defines how fast they're going. Lasers stay still. You define how fast you're going. So there is nothing stopping you from just chilling out under one of them.
Mm.
And, you know, I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but you could. I actually realize now this is, and I want to say this is warts and all this project. This is the project as I worked on it. So one of these things is poorly named, I think, which is calling that nested event the close layer. This is really the close layer. So if you hear, this is our main, and then the close is the one that gives you the punch. And yeah, look at me going the red.
I love how proud you are of that, and I love that you're showing this because again, why not?
I just
get past the limit.
I'm self-taught at this, and so, and I had a long period where I felt like everyone should, I'm not excusing it. I just felt like I didn't know what I was doing, and I still don't, but I've done it for 10 years now, and so like, call it imposter syndrome if you like, but it's like I am here and I am the one who's doing it. And so I don't know who makes the rules. And really, I'm making this for a dev team and for players, and it's up to them to object rather than me to object on some grounds of kind of me not feeling that I'm doing the right thing, you know?
100%. I mean, you've made it this far, 10 years in. You must know what you're doing, you know?
Either that or no one's cotton on yet. So then the endpoint is quite similar. So this is supposed to be really punchy as well, but it kind of goes with this VFX, which looks like the laser's cutting into something. And this would trap, often the laser you get close to would move. And so that's always going to be under the main layer, but it just gives it a difference when you're actually at the VFX part of it. And then the final piece of this is the ambient. So we heard the close, which was the sparkles.
Mm.
But then I also added what I called ambient wide. And again, we are altering the spawn rate on it. So we'll start at a bit of a distance. Oh yeah, and actually, as you can see, the volume is intended to peak not when you're close. So when you're close, I'm actually removing this layer because I have something else doing the job. This is I'm around the corner from a laser, and I would like the player to know that's coming. So when you start to, like, you're just cruising through the level and you hear, coming through the reverb, coming down the hallway, and you're like, Oh, I think I know what's coming, and then you turn around the corner. There's some really there were some very different uses of these as well. We had a boss one who would spawn it and spin it around the arena. And that actually was causing a lot of issues because it was coming up behind players. And so I had to really lean into the proximity awareness of that one. And then we had these other ones that would spin. We had these big circular vents, and the laser would just be spinning around in there. So you could move past it at the speed you desired, but also it was traveling. And so we wanted to get this really great, like whump, whump, whump. I think there's some footage of that in the dev blog. But I think that is lasers fairly well.
Amazing. I love that. I love the ambient like sparks that you've added as well. Like the whole ambience is changing because of this one thing. That sounds awesome. Fucking so cool, man.
You're always looking to add life into the world, and then the game designers are looking to add content and gameplay into the world. And so the more you can knit those things together, like, oh, your gameplay thing should have an effect on the sound of the world, that's when it starts, working as a unit, that's what you want to do as a sound designer.
Do you want to talk about the mixer reverbs?
Yeah, I do actually. I do. I'm gonna queue up a vocal line so that we can hear it. So one of the things, so again, first person game, you are as often in these kind of games, how you have someone in your ear who is your buddy or is she, who's telling you, what's going on, but you would respond to her, Taylin. And one of the things that I just tried early on and it stuck was putting a ton of reverb on the player's voice. So you would have a completely dry mono in your head radio voice, but then you would respond and you would hear it in the space. So to do that, that means I'm not baking reverbs onto anything because this is a traversal game. We are moving through a lot of diverse spaces. And actually, one of the things that really happened a lot was that you would go through a tiny tunnel open out into a big expanse. It was like one of the kind of visual aesthetics that the art director had. You kind of go through a pipe and then be like, whoa! But that's a challenge for audio. And so modulating room tones and reverbs became a thing early on that I knew I wanted to focus on. So did this in a couple of ways. So I'll just jump. I won't start at snapshots.
Whoa.
So what's well?
There was loads. I love it. No, my God.
Lots of snapshots. I mean, I don't know that I use them properly, to be honest with you. Like that whole overriding blending thing and like the hierarchy of them, there's a real intent for how that's designed, and I don't think I use it like that. But anyway, I'll talk about how I did use it. So yes, this is our mixer, and we have a reverbed bus in Sound Effects Master. Now that contains a ton of returns, one of which, well, a couple of which are the most important. So I'm just gonna look. So Reverb Master is the place where I send everything. So if I want reverb on anything, a sound effect asset or a VO asset, it gets sent to Reverb Master. So there's actually almost always things are being sent to Reverb Master. However, in there, I have another line of sends. Okay. So as you can see here, and these sends are going to convolution reverbs. So each one of these returns has got a different convolution reverb. But because I am sending to them proactively, these are all inactive 90% of the time. It's only when I use the snapshot to activate this bus by sending it from the master that it comes online. What that also means is that I can have more than one active at one time. So what we do in the game, say you are transitioning from a tiny space to a big space, those snapshots overlap and hand off to each other. So you will get a crossfade region that is actually based on the player's location, not time. So they would enter a volume, and the volume would be marked with an A side and a B side, which I would put in a doorway. And as they transitioned across that space, that would set the crossfade values. So they could walk 90% of the way there and then walk back and it would be fine. The transition would not occur until they moved through the space and came out the B side. So what I'm able to do is you're in tiny reverb, and as you approach the massive place, we're starting to send some massive reverb and reduce the tiny reverb. And as you come out of the space, tiny reverb drops off and big reverb takes over. And this was a really helpful system. And what I did was I used snapshots to take these sends. So if I go to here, so if we start with concrete medium, which is kind of the default one, in the snapshot concrete medium, you can now see that reverb master is sending to medium. And also, I didn't only use convolution reverbs. I also had a algorithmic reverb, which I could use to kind of augment and tie them together. Because the one thing about convolutions, I haven't made them. They're from different, I've collected them for a long time, but they don't always knit that well one to the other. So I use the built-in algorithmic reverb as a middle ground. But anyway, if I activate this snapshot and then we trigger a voice line, hold on, I will do that on my other window so that we can keep this one up. Well, I tell you what, no reverb.
Hey, Lynn, can you hear me?
You need folks. So then, reverb.
Hey, Lynn, can you hear me?
And so I went big on the reverbs. I'm not doing subtle for this voice. I want it to hit you over the head that you're in that space. So then we go massive.
Hey, Lynn, can you hear me?
And so that would be the beauty of the send model is I really have a lot of control over what I choose to be sent to the reverb. So for example, I was looking at the pistol. So for the pistol, because funny thing about our weapon, the pistol, it's actually your interaction tool. So you fire the pistol a ton outside of combat to like open buttons and stuff. And I really didn't want to. We actually had two different pistols in combat and out of combat because I wanted to hit you over the head while the music's playing and the enemies are fighting and it's power trip. But then while you're just chilling and you need to open a door, I didn't want to do the same thing. Then what I was able to do is when you're out of combat, slap a ton of reverb on the tail of the pistol. Like 5 seconds. And then that also varies as you walk through the space. So your footsteps, things like the tail and your movement. So if you do a double jump or a dash or something like that. Actually, I'll bust a dash out. I love that sound. It can't be a bullet hell game without a dash. Then if I just change it up, so this one is the hallway. See how those feel very different? And yeah, so I sort of just came to this system. I'm not sure when or how, but I'm so happy that I used it like this. It gave me so much flexibility.
So just to summarize as well, so the alternative is not having a reverb controller, like a reverb master where everything goes into, instead having the individual reverbs that you have here for each individual specific reverb. But obviously the problem with that is that if you're adding this return to, I don't know, 5 or 10 groups of sounds, like, UI, player sounds, enemies, and I don't know, say you change something in that reverb, you'll have to go into each one of those and affect that change, right? Affect the send, especially if it's based on a snapshot. You'll have to go back into each one of those and scope that in. Whereas now, if something changes, you just have to change the amount in the reverb master send down there.
But the real beauty was actually that all I need to do from the event side, and I can do this per track. So like for that pistol on the tail, I'm just sending from a track in the event, not even from the event. And then all I need to do is just define the amount of reverb I want to send. Let's say it's minus 16 dB sent to the reverb. Then a whole separate system running from the game engine is defining what the reverb is. So they're two separate things. I want it to go to the reverb, but then which one do I want it to go? And so the thing I had to balance with the actual reverbs themselves was if you have a cavernous space or a small space, you don't actually want the same level for both of those. But what it really meant is I have this kind of fire and forget from one side of my system, like, yeah, you should have reverb, and then I can, in a completely other place, deal with where and how. And keeping those separate, as you say, stops you getting into this thing where you've put this web into all these events, and then you need to adjust each strand of it.
That's fantastic. I'm a big fan of this reverb implementation method. Could you show us the pistol and exactly how you apply the reverb to the tail of that?
Sure. You know what? Weapons is really Sarah's thing. So I wonder if I want to save weapons for Sarah. Because it isn't interesting. I just have a send.
I mean, we can. Well, I don't know. I don't want to plan too far ahead. I mean, this is interesting and is relevant now. If we can look at
Right.
that, we can go back into it with her. Like,
Oh, actually, I tell a lie. So the tail is here, and then it has a send just on the master of this event.
right, that's what I thought. Okay, so you're using a command instrument to.
So I'm using a command instrument to trigger an event. But I could have absolutely put this send on. I'm just doing that to so that I can adjust this event more. But I could have absolutely just put like if this tail thing was not a command instrument, it was audio, I could just put a send to the Reverb Master. Boom.
Of course. That's fantastic. And then, okay, so thereby you hear the pistol shot dry, which is what you want because it's right next to you, right? It's right in front of under your nose. But the tail is describing the environment.
Exactly. But also that means there's middle ground. I mean, one of the command instrument benefits is so if I have this event separate, I can put an amount of reverb on this one, high amount of reverb. And then, oh, it's the no combat one that has one. Combat, I really kept the reverb low so there's not the mud. But then I can still put some reverb on the pistol. So I can do half the amount of send for the body and then twice the amount of send for the tail.
God, that's getting me thinking about the projects that I'm working on now and doing exactly that.
Because I think the alternative, so say for example, like you say, I didn't have this master bus. I just had 8 different buses for my 8 different reverbs. The reverb, I would need 8 sends in each event. And then I would still need to have the game tell which one was the active reverb and which one I needed to send.
100%. This is so much cleaner because you just have the reverb master and you do everything from there. Fantastic. In this next part of the interview, we're going to get into the music system that they created for Lunar Abyss. Again, it's a perfect example of how we can use middleware to create the adaptive systems that are needed for the game. I'm a strong believer that we should be using software like FMOD to finish off that final 10-20% of our sound design or music creations. And this is a great case in point of how Ali did just that. Right, no game is complete without some music. I'd love to know what you had to do maybe to implement the music, any challenges you kind of overcame.
Sure. I think that one of my best skills with music in FMOD is jank.
Is jank? Is that a genre?
Almost. If I was releasing in a genre, that is what I would release in, yeah. I mean, I've worked in my whole career, and I am realizing more and more that because I'm not a composer. And it's a very different skill set to what I do. And I don't aspire to be. But what I'm realizing is that the more that sound and music are connected at all points with the creation phase and the planning phase, the better. Because the reality of this project is that the music was done very early and excellently to such a high quality, but then it was delivered before the game was formed. And as you well know, and I'm sure many of your listeners know, games change as you make them. I mean, I think good ones do. Like, it's funny. I almost think like you could think ideally that an expert game designer would just know what they're making and go from end to end. But actually, my experience is the ones that are good at them pivot. They find the fun, they pivot. And so I had music that was done for something. I mean, it was for this game, but the game changed, and then the music didn't, and so jank occurred. With that context, actually, I'll show. So this was something I was proud of. So, I'll come back to the cutscenes. But if we go to levels, there was this really great moment. I mean, listen to this stem. It is one of the most. This composer, David Houston, is just, he's insane. So that was designed for this amazing cinematic reveal of our fourth biome. And as I mean, I'm proving my point here. You go through a very tiny walkway, up a ramp, and then as your eye line kind of reaches this space, you come out and it opens out. And so the composer wrote this amazing piece for that arriving. But he also wrote, I wonder if I have it here. No, this is my version of it. He wrote an intro. So like it's like a 4-second intro to that thing before the drop. However, because of how games work, players are involved. Oh, the bane of our existence, am I right? And so people can choose when they're walking up this hallway to stop and go and get a cup of tea. And like they might just slowly and cinematically walk out onto this ledge, but they might double jump and just sprint through, you know? And so I wanted this drop, and there's this beautiful tail well, not tail, there's a beautiful intro coming into it. And I wanted to have them both. I wanted my cake and to eat it. So what I did is I used a granular tool to make the intro a long play. So it will now loop. There is an intro to this piece, but I made a long play that would play for as long as needed. And then there is a music change event, which is a generic event that I use in all my music events, so that at any point I could just play music change equals 1, music change equals 2, music change equals 3. These are just events that I had in my event list in Unreal that I could just fire. And that means I could trigger a change of the music. So the music will loop here until the player hits the moment when they walk out onto the thing. So I'll just play it. So this is the intro, and then we move into the granular loop. So this is just supposed to be kind of an amorphous feeling of that moment, because it probably will only play for a second. It just might play for 10, and it can if it needs to. So when I move it to 1, this is when the player will walk out into the gateway. So that is hopefully something that no one will ever notice playing the game. And I think that's one of our finest moments as audio designers, is when you do something hard that no one will ever notice. Because it should just feel like an amazing cinematic moment. But there were so many ways that if you push the wrong button, you could ruin that cinematic moment. You could walk up to the trigger, turn around and sprint backwards and have this big choral thing happen, where it's that, hopefully, there is actually a tiny window where you could probably do that, but anyway, now someone's going to try and send me the video, but you know what I mean.
I will. This is fantastic. Can you and a fantastic example of how we can take linear things and make them adaptive thanks to middleware. I have one question. How did you granulate the music? Is that something you did in your DAW?
Yeah, I've got this amazing tool called the Mangle, which I just could not recommend more. And so yeah, I don't have the original. Oh, you know what? I wonder if I do. City O2. No, I don't.
That's cool. That's it. I just wanted to put that in there.
Yeah. So then, yeah, it's just the ability to capture the essence of a thing, but then make it loop.
Fantastic.
It takes some tweaking to do it, and it's not perfect. I wouldn't want you to listen to this for very long, but as a middle ground, it works for me.
Like you said, we can't anticipate every single possibility that a player might put the audio or the gameplay in, but we can try and find the average and the middle ground to make sure it covers as many eventualities as possible, right?
Agreed.
I mean, yeah, you can continue in wherever you want, but otherwise there was the music transitions and stingers that you mentioned to me.
Yeah, so I guess that is this. So I had an interesting journey with the combat music in our game. I didn't have stems for a long time, and I did get stems. And I also, there was it was at a time in the project where we were not looking to make changes, but the combat music had irked me for a long time, because the combat music is brilliant, but it was kind of at 11 out of 10 the whole time, which works in some combat situations. But you could have, so we have room clears. So you basically, there are waves, elite enemies, and then you clear the room and it ends. But the issue could be that there's one pleb enemy left and it's kind of hiding in the corner, and the music is like, oh, and you're actually just kind of walking around looking for one guy who you're going to kill in 2 shots. And so it had long irked me that we weren't respecting that gameplay. But I actually had to go through a little bit of a journey with it, because my intuition was that as combat intensity ramped up, music intensity should ramp up. And that was wrong for our game. It actually turned out the opposite was correct. So as I explained it, you normally get, we had, this is not a rule, but it's the usual flow to our combats. You would have a wave of enemies, like kind of minor enemies. An elite would come. Then when you killed the elite, cycle repeat. So you get a wave of enemies again, elite come, kill, repeat until you win. That's not exactly how it works, but that's essentially the thing. Now, elite enemies are enemies that fire a lot of bullets. And as I've said, the bullets are kind of what we're after. So you go from an early encounter where there are fairly basic enemies who aren't putting that many bullets out to you. That, the beginning of the fight, was actually the moment where the music had the most space and we could use the most kind of heart rate intensity. And then as the elite enemy came with the more complex attack, the floods of bullets, I actually wanted the music to get out of the way more, or at least create gaps. I wanted it to ebb and flow a bit more. But then you also want a reward that you killed the elite. Like, it's got to celebrate with you that you killed the elite. So that was kind of the loop that I created. Now, the music was not designed to do this. And so this is where I will follow up with the jank thing, because there are, like, listening to it in this format, you will hear the transitions. The good thing for me is that the transitions were linked to events in the game. So, for example, if you kill an enemy, there's a huge gore splatter and a very nice, like, headshot kill UI reward sound that would cover any transitions that you hear in here. Also, a spawn is a really big audio event in the game. Kind of many enemies spawn all around you. And again, this is very percussive, and it would cover some of the things that you might hear here. So I will just kind of play through this. So there's going to be different events in the music hard combat thing. So one is a kill. So that means that I think how we defined a kill was you either kill an elite or clear a wave of plebs. And so that's when the music comes up and celebrate. It's sort of a middle ground, actually. And then the elite spawning actually has intensity but gaps. So I want intensity but not power, so that the power can come from the enemy. And then the third state is the spawn refresh cycle. And again, we want a spawn is kind of actually the low moment for the game. And so the music should be at its highest. So, yes, you probably will not hear me when I play this, so I will try and do it and talk after. So let's clear the wave. And I will go back to this just to point out, not everything loops. So we have a default loop and an elite loop, but the other things are not loops. They just play for a certain number of bars and then return to the beginning. So let's spawn an elite. the elite. And spawn a new enemy. And combat ends. So I think that is no one's idea of the perfect musical arrangement. However, it really, really leveled up our gameplay.
Right. It feels super like atmospheric as well. It kind of reminds me of like Returnal. Like Returnal didn't really have in your face music like, say, I don't know, Doom, right? But it works because again, the gameplay is just so bullet hell crazy. You've got to focus on all these like numerous projectiles and new enemies coming on screen.
I mean, those are the two key references, and there were things that I took and things that I tried not to take from both games. Really interesting. And actually, you're bang on. Like, I think Doom does stay at 11 for the whole time for too long for me. And it was really that I was trying to fight against by just carving some gaps into the musical space.
I love that. I think often, like you said, sometimes we put too much into a game. Often less is more in many ways, in many cases. And also for Lunar Abyss, like the whole vibe is very kind of it's very kind of it's a mood, right? It's kind of like a dark, creepy mood. You kind of have to kind of ease into it almost. It's a very different game to say, for example, like Doom, which is just like you said, at 11 level, like turned up to 11 the whole time. There's more space it feels to breathe in Lunar Abyss.
Exactly right. And this is just one type of combat. So this is the hard combat kind of arenas. We also have soft combats where you're just fighting enemies in the space. And then we have bosses and even the final boss. And they're all handled quite differently. But this was the way that we chose to resolve the hard combats.
Wicked. You also mentioned some cool sounds that you made, like the biomechanical warden.
I would love to show you that. Can I show you one thing that we just went past as well? So I think I did something. I put energy into solving an issue, and that was handling audio for cutscenes in a game, because it turned out that we made a short film in this game.
It turned out so that wasn't the intention.
I mean, no, there was always going to be a lot of story in this game. We were a story-first studio, but it ended up with a lot of cutscenes. And so this is kind of what a cutscene event, this is what the game would trigger, and the Unreal timeline would trigger. So I just wanted to talk about what's going on in here. So the music for a cutscene and the sound effects were put in two different nested events because they can get sent to two different mixer groups, and thus you may choose to mix the music and the sound in a cutscene differently.
And specifically on this point, because this is a really good point, these are referenced events, not nested events. Meaning,
oh, well done, well done. Yes, correct.
Correct.
Thank
you. Meaning that they have their own mixer out, right? Whereas
I almost never use nested events.
Interesting.
But they're also yellow, which is why my brain is like naming them that. But a nested event, as you would say, would appear as a sub event under here.
Right. So it's only out to the mixer would be the parent event that it pertains to.
No, these just live down here below it. O1 music, O1 S effects. And then, so what that enabled me to do was potentially skip or not skip, because we had cutscene skipping in, and then kind of choose based on, so if you skip the cutscene, the sound effects would stop, the music would not, which is actually a really useful way of differentiating that, because obviously it can be quite jarring when people skip cutscenes, and so you're just cutting the audio, the sound effects, but then enabling the music to flow into the next scene, which I felt was quite helpful. And then I also did a lot of, well, there are some of these are lazy, I will admit to you, and I don't actually think this is in the ship build. I would never remove this, but this was an old part of the flow. But just using command instruments to stop other things, if you know that you're working in a sequence and you had music playing from, we had this prequel section, and I just know, all right, whatever happens, you will go through this step, and so I can stop that previous thing. I also had snapshot instruments. So basically, what happened in this is there is a difference between master solo, which is kill everything that isn't a cutscene, and allow ambience and VO to come through. So I can then transition partway through the cutscene when it kind of. I think what was happening here is we were loading a bunch of the game here. And so you would get nasty shit that you don't want to hear. But then you kind of do want the environment to build during the cutscene so that when you transition out of it, it's not this, you're handing over from one to the other. And so using these snapshots, which is again, these are just mixer presets. And they're the exact same thing as I showed in the mixer window with those snapshots for the reverb. So they are just applying settings into the mixer, but you can use them as an instrument on the timeline. So this will then turn on this snapshot, but fade it in over the intensity time and out again. And then very simply, we just had the skip cutscene. Why am I forgetting the word of what these things are called? Transition region. And so at any point, a cutscene could be skipped. The code would send a 1 to any event. And if it has a listener for this skip cutscene event, it would just stop.
Fantastic. Do you want to play
this
a demo? And
this
then,
ended up being very versatile and useful.
Do you want to play a little demo of this and skip it maybe?
Yeah, sure. So we have so now the sound of the level will be coming in. And there's always a fine line between what is music and what is sound effects. But you just got to choose sometimes. So then if we skip the cutscene, the music persists, but the audio is stopped. And this was the intro to our game. So it's like, you really don't want it to be like, this is when you're getting control of the player. So this little sting of music was really designed to give you this feeling when you're going. So just because someone chooses to skip the cutscene, you don't want to rob them of that feeling. But also, you don't want to artificially just slap in the end of the piece of music either. So it is, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It's such a simple but beautiful system to, again, keep the immersion there. Because, I love to like hit skip buttons by mistake because my fingers just jump. And this way, I know when I'm playing Lunar Abyss, I'm not going to be robbed of that mistake.
Most of the time. Sometimes. This is not game-wide, but in the moments where it mattered, this was a really useful thing to do. And again, like, this is me solving problems. This is not some kind of insight that I had. This is like, oh, that's really annoying when that happens. What do we do?
And again, a perfect example of like how FMOD can allow us that opportunity to fix this.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. All right, thank you for the slight diversion, but I looking back on that, I was like, that is a cool thing. So, as you very correctly said, we have these biomechanical wardens. So part of the gameplay is that you possess these different inhabitants of the lunar abyss, the moon that you're on, and you have been given a power to do this by the locals. So they're like, it's not as invasive as it sounds. They're trying to help you, these biomechanical wardens. But one of them was a roller coaster, basically. So it's this little head on a rail, and the gameplay is that you jump from rail to rail. So it's kind of like, it's one of those mobile games with the 3 tracks, and you've got to like jump over the obstacles and stuff. But the real thing about it was it's a cinematic look at one of our levels. So it's kind of like tourist mode. but you're also going really fast and you're going really close to like rock walls and through tunnels and stuff. And so those are some of the things that I was really trying to amplify. Now, I think that I can just do this here without the sandbox, but I'm not fully sure. But this would never move. So your camera was this thing. So the listeners right inside it, but obviously you were getting a lot of like there were things like loop the loops and big swervy sections and stuff. So you can see one of the things that I really added a lot of things for was so you have the raw speed, but then also the vertical and the horizontal speed. So that as you go around a curve, the sound is adapting to that. So if I begin it, we're at 0 speed, so nothing's happening. So if we increase the speed, and the speed range on this thing was insane because we did the lovely roller coaster thing where you like get to the top and then you really slow down and then you woof like straight down the hole, right? So if we so I kind of want a lot of the clanky like rail stuff at the lower speeds, and then the wind as you get higher. And then you were really at a fixed speed, so it's kind of more like and then the adjustments are these vertical and horizontal. So let's say we're going through a twist or a loop-the-loop. And then as you pivot around it. And so these are more just filter sweeps. And so what I'm trying to do is keep a lot of noise layers that the filter sweeps will really respond to. So you've got this kind of main pitch, because often pitch is my go-to for applying speed. What I have is this kind of engine layer. Maybe I'll just show some of the layers real quick. Let me just do... Yeah, no, actually that was fine. Some kind of middle speed. So... as opposed to the kind of wind things, which are not pitching, they're getting filter sweeps, and they really adjust more on these. And then one of the really fun things is that when you jumped across the rail, the rail goes and it's like make the engine really freak out. So it would be like airborne. And bring the volume down a little bit. And then one of the other things was you could pivot your head, and so I did do a bit of adjustment to the look direction. Oh, actually, that needs to be done in conjunction with something else. So there are two other aspects. One of them is the wall side. So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to show this. No, this is all pretty game level stuff. As you had a near pass to a wall, I wanted it to like feedback, basically like create this kind of phasing as you like whip past a cave wall. And so I can demonstrate that so I had a tunnel mode. And the tunnel is basically when you are completely enclosed. So this will give you a kind of an example. And it's quick. It happens quick. So like this.
How did you do that? How did you get that phasing effect?
That is a great question. I'm going to find out now. I feel like okay, so we've got oh yeah, sorry. So there's a whoosh as you enter the tunnel. That's what this is. So, and that is actually just on the timeline here. So as the event goes past point one, get the whoosh in. Oh, what? No. Yeah, if I drop the speed a lot, that's what I'm gonna do. Oh. So then, if we look at what's actually happening.
And that's a great example of you using the parameter sheet with its
to
time
trigger
control,
events.
right?
Yes, it's a really powerful thing. It really is. So we have a send here. So we are doing something in the mixer for this. So it's called the wall master. Oh yeah, I remember now. Because so we're gonna have to go over to the mixer. This is wacky actually. I would probably not recommend this approach, but wall. It's probably in hero, yeah. So wall master, and then we've got left and right. So this would create the distortion, but only on one side or the other. And then that's right. The look thing just sort of enabled me to adjust it. If we said the wall's on your right, but then you look left, you kind of want to get it out of the way. Or if it is hard in your right headphone, but then you look to the right, you want it to come center. So the wall master thing has this convolution in it, two convolutions in it. Wow. And an EQ. So I'm really slapping a ton of reverb. And this is not a convolution. This is a glass thing that wobbles. Like this is me using them inappropriately.
So basically you're using the convolution reverb not in its traditional sense to add
No, as a morph tool.
right, but morphing the sound by putting in a different kind of impulse.
Yeah, this is a wobble, a glass wobble. I don't think I can play the no. Oh, actually, it will be in the asset spin.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh wow.
and that makes it break, which is kind of what I want because physics-wise, if you do go through a rough tunnel and you're like creating a lot of air, because the thing is, you're going fast, you're creating a kind of a curtain of air in front of you. That's what the sound barrier is when you speed it up so fast that it breaks. So you're creating this cushion of air and then you jam it into a tunnel. And that's why I kind of wanted this like
It's a really cool effect, and I totally see myself in a tunnel with the sound around me distorting and phasing and flying past me.
and again, it's hard to demonstrate the effect of it in here. I would urge people to, when the game releases, go and ride the twin because I think it did come out really fun actually, and yeah, it wasn't necessarily going to be easy to do. So, I mean, as you can see, that is more parameters than I would usually go to.
But there's so many things to consider when you have locomotion, right? A vehicle in a game. I actually want to go back to the timeline and look at your engine because your
Yeah,
engine wasn't a loop, it was a scatter instrument, right?
right.
I haven't seen that done before.
So let's see what they are. So what I wanted was the engine to pulse. What I could have done, like, so similarly to the bullets, I could have had a pulsing loop and then used pitch to adjust that pulsing loop. But instead, I want to separately adjust spawn rate and pitch. So if we look at the speed, we're applying slightly different curves to the pitch and the spawn rate. So if I solo it, we'll need to go a bit faster. Because I think what was happening is pitch was doing too much. Like I wanted less pitch variation, so the engine didn't sound like totally like it's a Ferrari now. Wah! But I wanted the pulse to really step up. And it also enables me, like, so for this jump airborne, I can just go wacky with it. So there the scatter rate has gone really high, I think we're seeing. Yeah. Oh no, that was the pitch. But it enables me to choose.
Very cool. Very cool. And
FMOD, there's a million ways to skin a cat. I think that's the takeaway.
that's their new tagline. I've heard as well. They're gonna go with that.
Except some Australian version of that. Skin a prawn on the Barbie?
That's not actually a thing, is it?
I don't think so.
Amazing. This is fantastic. There's so much in there. Thank you so much. I'm quite
Man, thanks for asking. It's nice to show it. It's scary because, like, you don't build these projects to show them. You build them to sound right. And I hope, whoopsie, there you go. That is muscle memory being like save. And the whole reason that I did this is because I knew that my muscle memory would try and save it. Don't ever do that.
So what did you do there? What was that? Was that a failsafe or something?
Oh no, so this because I've not got it connected to source control. So it was flagging me errors that I'm trying to save things that are not in source control.
Oh, because
I do not want them in source control.
Does that mean you're using the built-in source control feature?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So actually, I mean, this is going to be really boring, but it's not set up. Actually, so I worked with an amazing sound designer, Sarah Sherlock, on this project, and it was the first time that I have collaborated with someone else in the same project. And this sync, merge, and commit tool was fantastic. So we would just at the end of the day merge, in the morning rectify, and we stayed completely set. We had no issues throughout the whole project of file mismatches, which is
So this is like, so for anybody who hasn't worked on a project, like source control is a way of like everybody sharing the same project, adding iterations and changes, and then uploading it to a cloud that somebody else can then pull from and then continue working on their part. And FMOD has its own built-in source control feature, which I've personally never had the opportunity to use, but it sounds like you've been using it with Sarah to share the project between each other, right?
Yes. And so what happens is these individual events, which actually does happen at source control level, are different files. So we don't actually send the project to each other. We just send the event data and the asset data to each other using the tool. And one of the real benefits is if I wonder I can copy it, but so events in F1 have an event name, but they also have what's called a GUID, a graphical user ID. Why it's called that, I don't know, because they're the most confusing things in the world. They're just hex code. And so when you use traditional source control with FMOD, it will not tell you Ali has made a change to twin rail hazard laser. It will tell you Ali has made a change to 4729683221, and there was like a workaround where you could open that in a text editor, go into the top line, and it would display the event name. But this way, in the source control, it shows you the actual event name. So it would say Ali's worked on these, Sarah's worked on these. There happens to be a conflict on the pistol. I would message Sarah and say, did you mean to do something on the pistol? And Sarah would say yes. And I would say, great. And we'd take their changes and move on with our lives.
Amazing.
Highly recommend. Highly.
Amazing. Fantastic. Ali, thank you so much for sharing all of this. This was very
You're so welcome. I'm so glad we ended on source control. What a going out on a high note.
Absolutely. We should have started and ended on source control.
Oh, always. But thanks for doing this, man. It's great to, like, I always learn about 7 million things watching someone for about 5 minutes and their middleware. I'm just like, oh, I never even knew you could do that, So thanks for exposing it. It's great to see.
And there you have it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did conducting it. Lots of great insights as usual from Ali and what Sarah did on this project. And I hope this inspires you to open up FMOD and try something you haven't tried before. Remember that if you're currently learning or studying game audio implementation and FMOD in particular, I have a gift for you. Please direct message me and I will send you a lesson and I will give you feedback on that lesson personally. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next deep dive.